Hey, welcome to the Mario Dattilo Show. I'm your host, Mario Dattilo. I've been investing in mobile home parks and other commercial real estate for years. And on this show, we interview some really interesting and successful real estate investors and business owners. We go behind the scenes on how they do what they do. I know you're going to get a ton of value out of this, so stick around till the end. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Super excited because I've got an awesome guest, Jared Yellin, on the show today. Jared Yellin is a really young entrepreneur who has built a portfolio of companies and has a really exciting goal and mission that he's working on right now, and a platform that I think everybody's going to get a lot out of. So, Jared, I really appreciate you getting on our show today. You've got a company called Project 10K. And maybe you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what that is, and let's dive into it, man.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing with the show. Like I mentioned prior, I'm an open book, so I want you to feel free to ask me anything. I want to create value for you, and most importantly, for your audience as well. I love what you're doing here. A little bit about Project 10K. So Project 10K is a tech ecosystem that is committed to building, scaling, and selling 10,000 tech companies in the next 10 years. I know this sounds slightly crazy, but we're now officially more onto something than we are crazy. And we've built the human infrastructure to achieve this outcome. Our systems, our processes, our team, our ecosystem, it's just unmatched. I've never seen anything quite like it. This is truly a calling. And I feel blessed that it was me that was called to catalyze this. And in our first year, we co-founded over 150 companies, which is more remarkable than 10,000 in 10 years, because that was the year to figure it out. And we have figured it out. But one thing I want to make sure everyone hears, it probably sounds like this is a guy that's just playing the law of averages. Like if you have 10,000 companies, you'll get one or two or three winners and you'll be great. And those three winners will be great, but every other entrepreneur is going to suffer like they would if they tried on their own. And it's the exact opposite of that, Mario. We do so much due diligence and so much validation testing that by the time that we say yes, we see a clear path to build it, to scale it, and to sell it. Not all unicorn status, but we do see a path for that idea to have a home in the market. So we'll dig in deep, I'm sure. But yes, I know this minute for your audience, I'm probably more crazy than I'm onto something. But by the end, they'll be like, this dude, he's gonna do it. He's onto something.
There's that combination of crazy and successful usually go pretty well together. So one thing I wanted to mention is that you aren't just a seed company, right? I mean, you're not just a seed funding company, and you kind of mentioned it. You're not just dripping money into a bunch of companies, placing bets to see who does well and who doesn't, expecting that the majority are going to fail, which is common in the tech world and in really any seed investor group. But you're actually, you've created a platform to help the company and grow the company and scale the company to where it is a marketable company. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we become the actual co-founder. So we're not investing. We are, at the moment, we're actually setting up our first fund. It's called Project 10K Capital. It's a $100 million debt and equity fund, but we're not investing. We're co-founding. What that means is that when an entrepreneur comes through our process, they come to us with a concept. That's it. Nothing more than a concept. We look for the napkins of the world. What I mean by that is every company that exists today that you can't live without. It's become so embedded into your day-to-day personal and professional life. It started on a napkin because everything starts as a concept. You can't bypass that step. That's just where everything is born. So all that we want to see are the concepts. We don't want more than that. We want the concept phase. And when the entrepreneur from around the world pitches us, there's four major pillars that we're looking for. The first pillar is the right people. The second pillar is the right idea. The third pillar is the right market that they're going to enter. And the fourth pillar is the right business model. And there's a lot of nuance to this, but if all four are verified and validated, we co-found a company with that entrepreneur. We both take equity in the company, so our values are perfectly aligned, and then we build the entire company at cost. And that's literally everything, from the software development to the business development, sales, customer support, legal, bookkeeping, investor relations, press, creative, like everything. And about 97% of the initial cost for what we call the minimum viable company, because we don't build products, we build companies, is at cost in India in a company that I've owned since 2017. So the risk is low and the cost is low. So we launched this project a little less than 2 years ago, and we committed from the get-go. We said, we are naming the company what we're causing in the world, which is 10,000 successful build scale cells for tech companies, and that we're doing it. So yeah, so we've really become co-founders. We are intimately involved. There's no end to our process until we actually sell the business with our fellow co-founder.
Jared, that's crazy. So one thing I was going to mention here is, you started out this business at least your first business at a relatively young age. We're about the same age. He's 37. I'm 38. What got you into the industry as a whole?
So I realized early in life, I was completely and utterly unemployable. So I never even tried, and I just went all in on entrepreneurship. So I've had a pretty good run for the past 17 years, and I've had some beautiful learning experiences as well. I am what you call a non-technical tech founder. So what that means is, just like yourself, there's not an engineering bone in my body. I know how to write marketing copy, and I know how to sell. About 11 years ago, I launched a company called Synduit. And the vision for Synduit was to build what I called the simplest marketing software in the world that was pre-populated with content across every major industry. We were going to turn it into a SaaS platform, which is a software as a service, a subscription model, and then sell it to small business owners. And in my mind, Mario, this was like freaking genius. I just didn't know where to start. I had the money to start because I had a previous exit, but I felt almost irresponsible throwing cash at such like an elusive concept. So I figured, let me just buy some time, because with time I'll gain more clarity and I'll monetize my skill set. So I started selling myself as a direct response marketing copywriter, and I got two pretty high profile thought leaders to hire me. And it was an easy decision for them because it was all performance based. I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to write your direct response marketing copy for free, and you pay me 30% of any new business that I produce. So this is your baseline. This is where you're starting. Anything I produce, 30% of that. They said, deal. So I made them an additional $1 million a month for 6 consecutive months. So they were obviously very happy. I did well economically, but more than the money, they just told everybody about me. And within 14 months, those 2 clients turned into almost 400 clients. And I was running a very large digital and creative agency for thought leaders. And it was really fun. We had a big team. We had a big office. We had really cool clients. Like, our clients were like the movers and shakers pretty much of every industry. And they were all up to like impact at this stage of their career. So like, we were behind some really cool initiatives. But for me, it was really a means to an end. I just wanted to launch this tech platform. And in 2012, I had clarity of what the platform would do. So I went out and started interviewing different software development firms all throughout the US. I spoke to a dozen of them, and I hired one in Boston that had a really good track record. And they told me that it would take 10 months and $750,000 to build the first version of the platform. And I went all in. I completely funded it myself. I was probably like 27, 28 years old at the time, writing a $50,000 to $100,000 check every month to offset the invoice. And at the end of 10 months, it was what we call D-Day, which was demo day. And I told my girlfriend at the time, whose name was Lindsay, she's now my wife, I said, our life changes today. I am becoming a tech founder today. And I took the drive from North New Jersey, where we used to live, to Boston. And when I got to the office, they greeted me and they said, we're so excited to have you. And they brought me to this beautiful conference room. And they said, Jared, we have some good news for you. And I heard them say some, and I'm like, oh no, like what? I'm like, listen, show me the some good news. So they started the demo on this huge flat screen TV in this beautiful office in downtown Boston. And the demo was absolutely amazing. Like, it blew my mind. It was so on point, so thorough, so thoughtful. And then after 2 minutes and 11 seconds, they shut off the demo. And I'm like, guys, why are you stopping? Like, you just got started. It's amazing. Like, keep going. And they said, well, that's the challenge. We miscalculated what it was going to take to finish the project. Nearly a year and a half and $1.5 million. And that's on top of the 10 months and 750. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, well, I just became a statistic, because this is such a common outcome for people like me, the non-tech founder that just doesn't know what they don't know. And as I sat there in complete silence, I remember thinking to myself, I have the right to be ferociously angry or morbidly depressed. Like, either extreme is completely normal right now. But for whatever reason, Mario, I felt grateful. I don't even know where the feeling came from. And as I started digging into this happened over the span of like 6 seconds. Like, it was fast. I realized that my gratitude stemmed from the fact that this was a chapter in my story called Jared's Entrepreneurial Journey. And in every chapter, there's always a moral, there's a principle, something that you extract from it. And for me, it was a commitment that I was making, which is I'm going to make the technology industry safe. I didn't know what I meant by it. I just knew that that didn't feel safe. And I know many other people that have had very similar outcomes attempting to get into the tech industry. The second thing happened though as well, which kind of changed the trajectory of my path at that time. I met somebody. So we had about 35 engineers on our team at that time that I hired through that firm in Boston. But one of them was a direct hire. And his name is Mani. And before Mani worked with me, he was living in India. And when he was in India, he started his own software development firm out of his parents' really, really small apartment, like 300 square foot apartment for the whole family. And he ended up going from that to 100 employees in 3 years. So outside of being a very strong engineer, he's a great businessman and manager and mentor. He ended up selling that company in 2012 because he wanted to move to the US in 2013 with his wife to start a family here. And when he moved to the US, he was living on the end of my street where my original office was in Englewood, New Jersey. So he could have been anywhere but there. And we'd have a very different conversation right now on this wonderful podcast. But he literally was a 10th of a mile from my office. We randomly met at a coffee shop one day. I invited him to see the office that same minute. I'm like, hey, come see what we're doing here. And I hired him on the spot. And he became my first in-house engineer. We worked together for about 15 months, built a ton of trust and rapport. And then one day I came into the office and I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to fire the vendor because they can't pull this off. You're my CTO. We're going to completely scrap what they did. 2 years and $2 million. Just scrap it because I know it's not done the right way. And let's do this right. Let's build our own team. And he said, that's my dream. And we did. And we started hiring engineers in the US, in Canada, and then about a dozen in India that Mani previously worked with. And when you're in tech, if you could figure out India, you're in great shape. It's just very hard to figure out India unless you have Mani, who hires his friends and his family. So it was really a blessing. The only downside was they were contractors. And when you're a contractor in India, your income is not recognized by banks. So as a result, you can't get personal loans for almost anything, houses, cars, like nothing. So eventually you lose your talent. So in 2017, I set up that company in India that I referenced earlier, hired the dozen engineers. They were really excited. I figured, let's use this as a recruiting tool. We ended up doubling the team in about 30 days. And then that was my catalyst for Synduit. And it led to Synduit becoming what it is today, where we have tens of thousands of paying users across 30 different industries. It's a very stable business, strong team. And about 2 years ago is when the magic happened. And the magic was I woke up one day and I realized I'm officially obsolete at Synduit. And that should be every entrepreneur's dream, right? So I was like, we did it. This is amazing. But what's my next chapter? Like at the time, I'm 35, 2 young kids, happily married. I'm like, what's next? And as I was digging into what's next, all that I could think about was that commitment that I made earlier to ensuring the technology industry would become safe. So I'm like, all right, that's what's next. And I'm committing now to my moonshot. I'm going to do something that shakes up this freaking world, and I'm going to go down trying. And as I started digging deeper into that, I felt this calling, which was do what you just did with Synduit, but do it 10,000 more times by 2031. And I don't know why that was the calling, but what I do know is you never negotiate against the calling. You just go with it. Right. So I called up Mani, who's still my CTO, and this woman, Katie, who is my director of operations, kind of like my right-hand woman at the company. And I said, I got this idea. I'm going to do it with or without both of you, but I can't imagine you not being involved. Let's build, scale, and sell 10,000 tech companies over the next 10 years. And the rest is history. We just got after it that day and haven't looked back since.
Jeez. So what I want to do is I want to bridge the gap here. You hit on a ton of good nuggets that the listeners on this of the show can learn from. And some people might be saying, why is he bringing on a tech entrepreneur when a lot of the people that are listening to this are either commercial real estate investors or in general entrepreneurs? And there are so many nuggets there. You talked about really proving yourself. And that's a consistent theme that we've heard across multiple entrepreneurs on this show. They stepped out. They didn't expect to get that high paying salary or the benefits or that cushy C-level, title next to their name. They said, hey, look, let me prove myself. I'll step out. I'll take a risk. I'll show you what I can do. Yeah, I want to get paid for it, but watch me. And then that's what's exploded their their career. That's what's exploded opportunities for them. And that's exactly what you did. You said, let me show you what I can do. Give me a cut only based on what I can produce. And when they saw you could actually produce, they told everybody about it. And that sounds like a pivotal moment in your career and in your business that launched you. Another thing that you mentioned several times is the teammates that you have and work with. Before we hit record today, we were just briefly talking about his company and kind of what he has going on. And he said, I spend about 1 second a week on this business, the first business he was talking about. And that is what all entrepreneurs should get to. They should be looking at, how do I systemize this company? How do I put the right people in the right seats so that not only will it scale on its own, but so that the owner of the company, the founder of the company, can move out of the day-to-day operations and move into that visionary seat, which allows them to see either big picture and focus on new opportunities and not be in the daily grind of it. And you've done that phenomenally, Jared. And then I think everybody can learn from that. So you've got this huge target, 10,000 companies, 10 years. You're not the only one that believes in it. You've got people that are already on your team that you've in your previous company that you've now moved over into the new company. You've also got some pretty high profile investors. One of them being Grant Cardone. And that's interesting because Grant Cardone is a real estate guy, very well known entrepreneur, but also primarily in commercial real estate. So, I understand that you've attracted to some people out of their typical industry into yours. What do you think attracted both Cardone and others to be involved in your project?
So I realized as I kind of like reverse engineered what we've accomplished, because I've built, with the support of now a large team, a few hundred people on the team, but what I call the $1 trillion perimeter. And what that means is we have $1 trillion of relationship capital that are circulating this project, and they all want the project to win. Like, they all want the project to win because of what we're causing in the world. We are democratizing and decentralizing technology. So what that means is democratizing is we've created a new table, and at the table is a seat for everybody. This moment, Mario, we have more women than men founders, which wasn't even intentional. It just kind of happened. We have almost every ethnicity represented. Our youngest founder is 11, and our oldest founder is 77, because our thesis is it's never too early, never too late to become a tech founder. We have high school dropouts, and we have Ivy League graduates. So it's really diversified. As long as you meet the criteria, you got a seat at the table. The second thing is decentralizing, which means we're bringing our tech infrastructure to cities and countries that have no tech infrastructure. So when you do something that's that significant, what happens is you start getting people's attention, and then you have to keep the attention. And there's 3 steps to keeping attention. And I did not realize this till I actually did it and started building relationship capital with people like Grant and people bigger than Grant that are even more relevant than Grant in the space that we're in. So there's 3 things. So the first is you declare your moonshot. And with us, that's build, scale, sell 10,000 tech companies in the next 10 years. The second thing we did is what I call take maniac action, which means that people that are observing think that you're crazy and also onto something at the same time. So that means you're taking so much action so quickly. You're not just declaring the moonshot, you're backing it with even more action than what you're declaring. And then the third thing is you talk about what you're doing incessantly. So those are the 3 things that we did. And as a result, it just led to an enormous amount of attention. And that attention is, and I'll speak into the Grant in a moment, just to throw them up to your audience, but it's from icons in Silicon Valley, like historians, like people that, like one of the people like literally started the venture capital industry, like his grandfather started it and he's now living out that legacy, to family offices, private equity, athletes, celebrities, politicians, and then even our team. Like, we've attracted such crazy talent to be part of our team. It's just fascinating, like the level of human infrastructure. We have this thing called ecosystem partners, and ecosystem partners are thought leaders, like legitimate thought leaders that have influence over entrepreneurs with tech ideas, incubators and accelerators that already exist that are working with entrepreneurs that are a little bit later stage than us. So they send us everyone that they're saying no to because they don't have an offer for them. And then universities and different entrepreneurial ecosystems, et cetera. So we just have an enormous amount of attention. So the way that the Grant Cardone relationship was formed is he heard about what I was doing through one of our co-founders that was talking about what he was doing with me. And he told his president, who's also Jared, this dude's crazy or he's onto something, but I want to meet him. So they called me up one day and then said, hey, Grant wants to meet you. And I drove out. I was living in Naples, Florida at the time. And I drove out to Miami to meet with him. And I didn't know him personally. Obviously, I knew of him, but I didn't know him personally. And when I went into this meeting, I had no plan. There was no intent, like nothing. If anything, I thought, well, maybe he'll promote Product 10K and we'll get some more entrepreneurs to submit their ideas. Like that was at the extent of where my mind was at. And we met for about 4 hours that first day. And I really got to know him because there's a persona that he represents, which is for some, they love it. And for some, they hate it. And I knew there was more to it than just that. So I got to know him. I got to know him as a father and as a husband and a leader in his organization. And we really hit it off. Like our values are extremely aligned. His desire to create an even playing field is completely compatible with what we're doing. And after about an hour and a half or so, he said, Jared, I want to support this project. So I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, well, what could Grant Cardone do to support this project? Because in so many ways, he's kind of like the antithesis of what we're doing. Like he literally tells people, do not invest in things you can't touch. Right. And we're building software. Like he's a real estate guy. So I'm like, well, okay, there's that, which that's not necessarily a positive. But in addition to that, one thing I do know is that he's extremely polarizing. Like people either love him or they absolutely can't stand him, but universally, everybody knows he's a great investor because there's not many people that have invested their way to produce what he produced. Like, it's not like he sold a company for $1 billion. Like he literally built an investment portfolio that's worth $5 billion at this point, like just through like grit and grind. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if even his haters, they know he's a great investor, maybe I should invite him to invest because it'd be like a stamp of approval. But I wasn't raising capital. I had no documents. Like there was no investment plan. Like there was no use of funds. There was nothing. So I'm like, Grant, why don't you invest? And he goes, I'm in. And he made a pretty significant investment into the project. And the reason he did, this is like the underlining lesson for everybody, because many of you might say to yourself, wow, like I can't imagine sitting down across the table from Grant Cardone or whoever that is for you, right? Because you have somebody that potentially could be a catalyst or an accelerator for you. But the reason he invested is because I had leverage over him. And the leverage sounds like this. Jared's doing this with or without me, and I can't do it without him. And that's what's going on in his mind. And I know it is because we talked about it after the fact. He's like, yeah, dude, you were going to do it with or without me. I didn't want to miss out. And there was no way, there was no amount of money I could pay to do what you were doing, which is why I wanted to invest in what you were doing so I can go on the journey with you. It's a really important lesson for any of you that's trying to do anything of significance where you're reaching up to people that may already have accomplished at least a piece of what you ultimately desire. Realize, like, if you're going to do it with or without them and they can't do it without you, you have a very good chance of having them want to join you in the first place. So initially he invested, and then from there he became one of our ecosystem partners as well, which means that he goes out and he promotes Project 10K, and any entrepreneur that comes through his effort, if we do move forward with the entrepreneur, he gets a little bit of equity as one of the co-founders as well, which is great because when those companies mature, then he'll obviously promote it and put them on stages and things like that as well. So that's the story of Grant, a ton of opportunities for all of you to create your own version of that with whoever's relevant to what you're looking to do.
Man, I've been taking notes this whole time, Jared, and there's a few huge points I want to make that people may have missed. You talked about the 3 keys, and that's building, build a moonshot, right? So that means set that big vision, that big picture goal out there, right? Then you said take maniac action. I've never heard that before. I've heard massive, but you said maniac action. So we're not just talking, we're not just dreaming, we're actually putting crazy action behind it and showing how much we believe in it by our actions. And then you said talk about it incessantly. Man, how many people go out and have this big vision and either don't take action on it or they start taking action on it, but they just don't really tell anybody. They're worried about what other people are going to think. They're worried about, getting looked at like they're crazy. And you're saying, just go talk about it. Tell everybody about it. And yeah, some people are going to think you're crazy, but it's going to attract the people who are also attracted to that vision. And they're at least going to hear about it to give them the opportunity to participate. You also said you need to have leverage. And we've talked about this before. whether it's on my YouTube channel or on this podcast, that when you're out raising capital, which is kind of what you were doing unexpectedly, you can't go in with a needy attitude. And your attitude is, look, I'm doing this. This is happening with or without you. And that creates that posture, that creates that confidence that other people are attracted to. It's always hardest to raise capital when you need it. It's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's a lot easier to raise capital and to bring on partners and attract the right people when you don't need them. And that's what you're talking about here. It's, I'm going to do it. And if you want to participate, you can, but I'm doing it either way. And they can't do it without you. And they're seeing this huge vision that they're attracted to. So love that. Also, you talked about, creating deal flow. It was kind of a side note, but you said, I've created some lead flow coming from either other VCs or seed capital investors. They're passing to you deal flow that they decided not to pursue. You're creating lead flow that puts enough on your desk to where you're constantly looking at opportunities. What I see both in business and in real estate is people are creating just enough lead flow to say they're in business, but they don't have that massive lead flow where they can really pick and choose. You said in the beginning that you do a ton of due diligence before you actually sign on with them and partner with them. Well, you're probably doing due diligence on a lot of deals, right? And so you're picking and choosing the ones that make the most sense. And because you've got so much lead flow, you've got great opportunities. Don't stretch. Don't try and force marginal deals to work. Sort and filter through and find the right opportunities. And so really awesome. What do you think? And one of the reasons I wanted you on this show, Jared, is you're a systems guy, right? Everything you've talked about, you've created a company, you've scaled it, you've put the right people and the right systems in place. And I think for anybody who's building a company or a real estate portfolio, that's the way they need to be thinking. They can't be thinking about being in the business and doing everything themselves. What are kind of the key foundational systems or pillars in the businesses that you're starting? And you kind of ran through several different, call it departments, but what are the key foundations of the companies that you're helping start?
So I realized very early as an entrepreneur, never do business with any vendor, person, etc., that does not have systems, because it's just complete uncontrolled chaos. So knowing that from just early entrepreneurship, where I made a decision to work with somebody that didn't have systems, and it was like one step forward, 3 steps backwards, a half step forward, 4 steps backwards. It was just chaos. I'm like, I won't be that person. So I'm gonna always have enough foresight to be at least one detail ahead at all times. That's really an important distinction, because I believe that business plans are the biggest waste of time. I believe that people that spend months or years like developing out their big plan for something they haven't even executed on, they're just afraid to execute in the first place. So it's not about literally having the entire plan laid out and the entire system laid out, but it's always being at least one detail ahead at all times. And that's just what we did. Because when we committed to building, scaling, and selling 10,000 tech companies in 10 years, if we had to figure out every detail, we never would have gotten started, because there's just too many details. So we were just one detail ahead at all times. We're also completely unromantic about what works and what doesn't work. And we can change our mind whenever we want. And we've done that many times, where we committed to a specific thesis and that thesis worked, and then all of a sudden it stopped working, and we weren't romantic about it. We just scrapped it and then created a new thesis and a new strategy, a new plan and process forward. But we're extraordinarily process driven. And at this stage, we have a lot of people on the team, but even when we didn't, we were very process driven. What we do is we identify what we call the flame of every person on our team. And the flame is what they're uniquely qualified to do. Because what happens is, even with small teams, you should do this as well. When you identify flame, which is like what someone's uniquely qualified to do from a skill perspective, passion perspective, like lose track of time and space perspective, like they get more done because it's just what they do. There's no friction. When you can build an entire organization where everyone is in their flame at all times, what you produce is a bonfire. And bonfires are out of control. Like, it just always is giving off heat and energy. So that's like the visual that I create with even our co-founders as well. We just identify flame, and we keep people in that at all times. so that collectively it produces a bonfire. We're also always at least one detail ahead, and at most one detail ahead. So we're really not planning too far into the future. We're just always like ahead of where we need to be. And when we find things that work, we immediately systematize it. We use all different platforms and tools to achieve this. We're a very data-driven company, so everything is KPI based, from an individual person's productivity and output to companies to hitting certain milestones. Till if what the KPI is blank at the end of the month and you're not there, then you're not sleeping. Like, you have to hit that KPI. Like, so don't wait to the end of the month. Like, because the other thing too is, as much as we care about building, scaling, and selling 10,000 tech companies in 10 years, which we do, what we care about even more is who each entrepreneur becomes in the process. Because in the end, if their spouse hates them, their kids don't know them, and they have autoimmune disease because they made poor health decisions while they were on that journey to their exit, we fail them. So as much as we talk business with them, which obviously we do, we talk about what we call is have it all. And they have to define that from the start. And we hold people accountable to it as well. So the example of the KPI, it's not that you don't sleep for 4 days and don't see your kids because you just aren't close to hitting it. Like, pace yourself so you hit it. Like, the only reason you miss a target is not because of the day that the target was supposed to be accomplished. It's every day leading up to it that you miss the target. So just find a way to make sure that you're always hitting your daily targets, and then you'll hit your monthly targets, which then means you hit your annual targets as well. But data, systems, processes, and then everybody's in their flame at all times.
Jeez. Yeah, KPIs, a lot of times people wait till the end of the month to report on their KPIs, and you should know your number daily and then be reporting it weekly. And then that'll get you to your number at the end of the month, the end of the quarter, end of the year. Love it. And that's in any company, any investment strategy, whatever. Now, you talked about a flame uniquely, and that is something that each person is uniquely able to do. So you're really focused on not only the business, but you're really focused on the individuals in your company, making sure that you've got those right people in the right seats. I love the bonfire analogy. You also mentioned that you are not in love with anything. It's like you're not getting emotional about the things that you're doing. You're testing, you're figuring out what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't, you just change what you're doing. You keep tweaking. A lot of times what people do is they get religious about their whatever they're doing and how they do it. They're so emotionally tied to how they do things or what they're doing that they don't pivot when they absolutely need to, and it takes them too far off track. So I love that. And then also the business plan's a waste of time. It's kind of the ready, fire, aim, it sounds like. So you're shooting, you're adjusting, it sounds like you have some bit of a plan. You've got, what you're doing, but just the next step ahead, right? You're not spending weeks, months, years planning something out that's probably going to change 50 times in the next, 60 days. So you might as well get a little bit ahead, tweak it, test it, and then just keep modifying until you get what works and what doesn't figured out. That's huge. So what's kind of the structure of the deals? And let me pause real quick before I finish this question. This is something that commercial real estate investors who are building, or who are sponsoring deals, who are building portfolios, or other entrepreneurs in other industries can utilize. You've got a joint venture or a co-sponsoring, for this is lingo that the listeners will understand. He's co-sponsoring or joint venturing with these partners, these people who have the great ideas or the great opportunities. And if you're in commercial real estate and you've got someone who's bringing you a deal, you could then co-sponsor and partner with that person, come in, add a ton of value to what they're doing, potentially raise capital for them or whatever needs to happen, and therefore take equity in that deal. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're doing. Can you maybe just talk high level on how you structure these deals with the entrepreneurs that are bringing you the ideas?
Yeah, so we created this thing called the FAIR Agreement. This is going to be like universally adopted across every industry. I'm positive. As we push it out into the world more, it's just going to become the standard of partnership, because most partnerships will inevitably fail. because who you are on day 0 in the partnership is not necessarily who you are on year 10. And your values may have changed, your desires may have changed. And I have a friend right now that has a very, very successful business with a partner. They co-founded it together, and I think they're on their 15th year. They've done exceptionally well. And they're at such extreme odds that it's going to put the whole business out, like at this point, because they didn't have a fair agreement from the beginning. So although in theory it was fair, right? But it wasn't really fair because it didn't grow with them and evolve with them. So the fair agreement starts fair in the sense the entrepreneur is bringing an idea, and that's all that they're bringing, just a concept. There's no company, there's no name, there's no IP. It's like, I have a problem, and this is the solution I think that we need to build to solve this problem. Like, it's really early stage. So we start 50-50, and that's 50% equity from them and 50% equity for Project 10K. And then from there, the fair agreement is this objective sliding scale based on roles and responsibilities and what each party's actually doing. And if a partner, if a co-founder is dominating it and they're doing more than 50% of their effort, it's going to slide in the direction of them having more equity. And if they're doing less, because maybe they get less interested over time, it'll slide in the direction for us, not necessarily so we have more equity. We have more equity to issue out to have somebody else replace what they're no longer doing, which is what we expected them to do from the start. But everything starts 50-50. That's the deal. It's a templatized deal. It's non-negotiable. This is one reason why we only take on concepts. There was a point in this journey, this is one of those things we changed our mind on, where we said, okay, yeah, if somebody has what's called a minimum viable product, which means they've already invested some money into it, it does something, maybe it's generating some cash flow, but they still need what we do. Like, they really need the software development side, the product management side, the go-to-market side, the sales side. Like, they need that to really accelerate. There was a point in time where we're like, yeah, we'll take you in. But the challenge with that is they've already made 47 decisions at that point. We don't know what they were or why they were those decisions. So we have to make decision 0 until exit. Like, we just have to. So we just changed our mind. And those companies that were more mature were like, here, no harm, no foul. We're not the right partner for you. Here's your equity. Take it back. You could still benefit from some of the other things that we do from a training perspective. And we want you to win. You're wonderful, but we're just not the right partner for you. So, but every agreement's the same. It's non-negotiable. In addition to that, and you kind of alluded before to how I said, like, talk about what you're doing incessantly. We do not sign NDAs. We'll never sign an NDA. Ideas have no value. Like, and again, they have all the value in the world because everything starts as an idea. But people that are like really like keeping it close to the chest are like, I can't tell you my idea. It's like, listen, first off, there's nothing unique in the world other than the Bible. So there's nothing, like, that's the only thing in the world that's actually unique. Everything else is an iteration off of other things. And if that's the mentality of the person, they're not fit for partnership because they don't default to trust first. They default to prove yourself and then I'll trust you. That doesn't work in our partnerships. So we're like, yeah, cool. You keep the idea close to the chest, but we're just not going to partner with you. And the odds of that person executing on that idea are as close as 0% as you can imagine. Yeah. And they're going to die with it. And I don't say that out of like me being arrogant, like I told you so. Like, I say it because the vast majority of potential resides in the graveyard because people don't know where to go with it. They have the idea, it's scribbled on a piece of paper, it's sitting in their wallet. They don't know who to trust. They don't know what their next step is. They don't have the resources they think to get started. And then they just like think about this. How many Googles are in the graveyard right now? Like, how many Facebooks, how many clubs? Like, it's fascinating. Like, there's this really interesting concept that in every sports stadium, the greatest player is actually not on the field. They're watching from the stands, all the people on the field that have the courage to step to the field. They're better, but they just didn't have the courage to execute. So they're now watching other people and they're wearing somebody else's name on their jersey. Like, somebody else did when they could have been the LeBron or the Stephon or the Michael. Like, they had that skill. They just didn't have the courage to step on the field. The same holds true in entrepreneurship. That's why we exist, because we've created a safe space. We've created the home of the idea, which is where everything starts. And now you asked more about systems. Part of systems are standards, and they're just non-negotiable. This is just the way that they are. And it's not like we're strong-arming it. We just have an outcome we're causing, which is build, scale, sell 10,000 tech companies in 10 years. That's not because of us. It's because that's what's required in entrepreneurship. Think about every industry has been disrupted. Like, every industry, right? Like, transportation has been disrupted, hospitality, like food, like everything has been disrupted, but entrepreneurship hasn't. Entrepreneurship still only has a success rate of 1%. Like, that's crazy. Like, how after hundreds of years of entrepreneurship has there not been a way to increase the success rate from 1% to something exponentially more? We've done that in hospitality. Hospitality is exponentially better because of Airbnb. Like travel exponentially better because of Uber. Like food, like exponentially better because of all these delivery services. Like, so many industries wildly disrupted, but entrepreneurship is still able to just be okay. So that's what we're really doing. Like, well, it sounds like, oh, well, they're launching all these tech companies. No, we're putting a new standard in entrepreneurship, which is called together, because together we achieve more. And the reason this plays out so well is because in an ecosystem, which is what Project 10K is, we share everything. We share end users, we share investors, we share emotional support, we share data, we share what works, we share what doesn't work. Like, we share everything. Whereas the entrepreneur who's on an island by themselves, trying to figure out everything by themselves, is by themselves. And the chance of them figuring it out is so slim. And that's why there's a 1% success rate. We're going to prove the exact opposite, which is everybody wins inside the ecosystem so they can leverage one another on the journey.
Man, you had just said,
that moment where people are like, wait, he's not crazy. He's
yeah, no, definitely not crazy. Well, a little bit crazy, but crazy enough to go execute, right? And I think that's what everybody needs to pay attention to, is ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody's got ideas. How many times have you been driving down the road, some cool invention, some cool idea pops into your mind, and you go, man, I could make billions off of that, but what do you do with it? Nothing. You might even write it down. You might even tell a few people, but most people don't put the effort that what did you call it? Let's see here. You called it maniac action behind it. They just don't. They don't. And so I think it's great that that you've got such an open book to not only, the people in your company, but potential entrepreneurs that are coming to you. It also stands out to me that you shifted from working with people who have already invested money, have already put some things in place, have already started building their business. You said, forget all that. I don't want to work with people that have already made decisions. I want to work with people at the idea level. And that shows a lot of confidence in your systems, in the platform that you're offering, because you're just saying, all I need is the right idea. I've got everything else. And you're bringing those people into your platform and then helping them scale. That's huge. That's so backwards. And that's cool, because a lot of times you hear from investors that they want the person to have a lot of skin in the game. They want somebody to already have proof of concept. They want all those things. And you're saying, no, I just need the right ideas with the right people. So let me ask you this. For your partnerships, I mean, just a simple ratio or percentage, how many of those have went bad? And the reason I ask is because in the seed funding and in the investor world, especially when you're coming in as an LP, which you're not, you're coming in as kind of a co-sponsor, general partner. A lot of times partnerships can go bad, and you hear a lot about that. How many of the partnerships that you've went into have kind of went where you're like, okay, this person is not going to run with it. They're not the right person, or we just need to scrap this? Just curious.
So we haven't had any companies that had that outcome. We've had, I think, 5 peaceful divorces, and they ended up being peaceful, which is great, because it was really early that we identified what we call wrong person. And that's actually the term we use, wrong person, because we're looking for the right person. And we then identified the 8 non-negotiable characteristics of the right person based on the fact that we had 5 of the wrong people. And they all were wrong for different reasons. Like, some of them were wrong because they were only all in if it worked, and that's just not what this looks like, right? So we're gonna have to be all in regardless and then make it work. And others had really ridiculous reasons for saying that they weren't in, like political things. Like, I'm like, come on, really? Like, really? Like, you know, the same ideology, you don't want to do this anymore? Like, that's a little extreme. So yeah, there was some of that, which I'm really happy that we figured that out early, because that there's no way that's gonna work. But yeah, it was always peaceful and always a great learning experience. And I'm not saying that to cover up that it wasn't. Like, it really was. Like, we really had peaceful divorces. And part of it is a function of the fair agreement. Like, the agreement's just fair from the start. So it allows for that. And this is why I'm saying this fair agreement is going to become the universal standard across all partnership. I am positive of this. Like, we had so many lawyers that were like, can't do it. I'm like, all right, here's what I need to do. I need to find someone who's an entrepreneur that happens to be a lawyer so that they can help me assemble this and then legalize it and keep it really simple so that the everyday person can understand it. So I really believe this is going to become the standard of partnerships. And what it does is it really prevents those nasty, like for example, my friend, if he had a fair agreement 12 years ago, they would not be at risk of losing the company at this point. I'm positive. They just have like they're just at different places of their life. Like one person has no kids, the other one has kids. Like he has a different vision of what he wants to do with the company. Now he's at that stage of his life. This other person's like, no way, we're going in this direction. But on day zero, completely aligned. Like they were the same person. Like they just graduated college. They're hungry. They're eager. They're living with their parents. They have no responsibility. Like whatever it takes, let's go. 12 years later, it's just they're different people. That's life. That's evolution. It's beautiful. It's harmony unless you don't have a fair agreement from the start. So yeah, so they've all been peaceful, but what it really did was help us immensely in identifying the characteristics. They're non-negotiable now. We actually, in the due diligence process, we assess them. Like we assess they're all in this. We assess their relevancy around relationship capital. We assess their expertise on the problem they're solving. Like there's just things that we learned in each of these peaceful divorces that allowed us to get clearer on what's needed so that there's 100% success rate. I don't mean 100% like unicorn exit rate. That's not what
right.
I mean. So success rate to me is a healthy partnership that figures out how to take the problem that we committed to solving it eloquently, and then building enough value so that somebody else wants to buy it in the future.
I almost feel like your secret sauce here is it. Yeah, you've got a platform, you've got the ability to scale companies systematically, but I almost feel that your secret sauce is your ability to partner with people and create partnerships with, on good opportunities. And I've done some deals where I've partnered with people and, 99% of them have went really well. One of them did not go well. And I use the term marriage whenever I explain a partnership. So the fact that you talk about it, the divorce, the exit, if you have to split up, it's exactly right. It's really, you're marrying the person. So you're putting a lot of effort.
This is a really good insight for everybody. So we created this document. It's called the Project 10K Code. Mm-hmm. And some companies would call this core values. It's just deeper than core values. Like the code is embedded into the fiber of every human in our company, in our ecosystem, and everybody, whether you're an employee, an investor in an individual entity, an investor in the holding company, a co-founder, if you are even thinking about Project 10K, you're signing the code. And the code is one word, it's an acronym, and then there's a ton of meaning attached to it. And the word is together. And each letter has distinct meaning attached to it. And what this is a mechanism for communication, because by far the most challenging thing we're doing is not building, scaling, and selling 10,000 tech companies in 10 years. By far, it's the number of people that are involved in building, scaling, and selling 10,000 tech companies in a year, because everybody has different values and beliefs, interests. It's like, I'm going to share a funny story in a moment, but the code is what makes it work, because we communicate through code. So for example, if like the T is take 100% responsibility. If a co-founder feels that one of the team members is not doing that, all they have to say is, Bob, take 100% responsibility. And Bob will stop pointing fingers immediately because he signed the code and he knows, and vice versa. If the co-founder said they were going to do something and didn't do something, Bob says, hey, co-founder John, take 100% responsibility, and they have to stop pointing fingers because they've already signed it. You can't argue against the code. The code in personal and professional life always makes things more optimal. So that's what transpires. In addition, we've had to, and this is something we're still working on, conditioning everybody to realize this is not a client-vendor relationship. Because I've never seen a client-vendor relationship that really works, because there's not complete alignment of values. So I don't see it working, and it definitely doesn't work in the context of what we're doing. So we're like, hey, it's co-founder relationship, which means have the hard conversations. Like if someone on our team needs to have a hard conversation with one of our co-founders, that's what happens in business. But client vendor, that isn't what happens. Like they put it under the carpet. They don't want to talk about it. They're afraid they're going to get the person angry. They're going to get fired. Like that's not the dynamics here. Here's a funny story. So years ago, I was sitting down. There's a store called Steve & Barry's, and Steve & Barry's was this retail store that was on pretty much every major college campus, and it sold the college garb, like the shirts and the hats. And I was with Barry in his kitchen in Long Island where he lived, and they had 365 stores when he sold. So it was like a lot of stores. And he said to me, if you had one store, like one retail store, what would happen is once a year there's going to be like an oh crap moment, like something happens and it's like, oh my god, 911, I got to solve it. Like, but you have one store, so once a year it's inevitable, something is going to go wrong. When you have 365 stores, each of the stores is going to have an oh crap moment, which means that you're having an oh crap moment every single day. And I remember him saying that to me, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, he has to literally deal with crap every day. So then I look at myself now, right? Like 150 plus co-founders. And if you had one partner guaranteed at least once a year, that partners have a life event outside of business that they're going to call their partner with to have a conversation around. It could be about their kids, their significant other, their health. And now I created the Barry, because almost every day I have founders that reach out with like something nothing to do with what we're actually doing. Like, they're like, you're not going to believe it. My kid like took our car and they drove it in, like out onto the neighbor's front lawn. It's like, all right, we got to create a new mechanism here, which is like, I can't have those conversations with 150 founders and eventually 10,000. So we created a mechanism to solve for that. But yeah, just the funny aside on the human element of what we're doing.
You've built a culture. That's what you've everything that you talk about as an acronym has a storyline behind it, a theory behind it. I can tell that you've really created a culture within this ecosystem. And you have to, at 150 companies, let alone 10,000 companies, you have to create this cohesiveness. And I see it 100%. You've got tons of communication. It sounds like open communication with people. Listen, if I was going to, and Jared and I have recently met, we were introduced by our buddy Josh, and it just from what I've recognized and noticed from you, Jared, is you're a visionary, man. And you got that huge vision and you're excellent at communicating it. And I respect that a lot. As a CEO type position in my organization, I love it. It stands out like crazy. So for those who are in visionary type CEO role within their company, any books, any direction that you could point people that could help them build that culture, build that ability to, cast vision to their organization that you could recommend?
So here's what's really interesting. I'm one of the most insulated humans that you'll ever meet in the sense of what I take in from a audio or reading perspective. Like I almost don't read anything at this point. I did when I was a lot younger. I nonstop think, but I don't ever get stuck in my head. And that's like a very interesting distinction, because to anyone that has a child really will get this. So if your child was in danger, you wouldn't think about how to help your child. You would just get into your gut. You wouldn't think about anything and you would just help your child, right? But so many people don't apply that same premise to business or life. Like they try to like think their way out of problems, and you can't think your way out of a problem. You have to execute out of your gut to get out of the problem. So for me, I am constantly observing, thinking, analyzing, and that's really what I do. So and that's not replicatable. I totally get that, because people ask me all the time, like, what did you read to learn that? I don't really read. Like, I just nonstop think, I observe, I analyze, but most importantly, I execute the moment my gut says to execute. And I've conditioned myself to do that. So I don't get stuck in my thoughts. I always am testing things that I think of, because eventually they get into your gut, and that's where really everything comes from, is your gut. That's your intuition. So I can't tell anybody a book. What I can tell them is do this. You have to start taking Maniac action. You just have to, like in whatever domain you're in. You were talking before about people that invest in real estate and they have like just enough deal flow. That's when you start making bad decisions, because you have like just enough. You have just enough leads. You have just enough. You have to have so much more than enough that you can become selective and create criteria and non-negotiables around your decisions. We've had thousands of entrepreneurs come through our process, like thousands to say yes to the right 150, right? That's the reason why we have the right 150. So I just encourage you, take more action than you think about taking action. Like just do it. Like create more content, like get out there and become what many call omnipresent. And what omnipresence means is that your ecosystem, the people that are following you, they feel like you're everywhere. And that's because you are everywhere, because you're producing, you're sharing, you're telling stories, you're looking at deals. Keep adding more to your life. Become an and person, not an or person. Most people are picking and choosing. I just don't do that. If it's aligned with what I value, it's and I just create more bandwidth and I have really firm boundaries. And at 5 o'clock every day, I'm dad until my kids go to bed. And then I'm with my wife until she goes to bed. And then I spend 90 minutes writing. That's what I do instead of reading. I write. So I spend 90 minutes writing, which prepares me for the next day. And I'm up at 4 a.m. I'm in the gym and I never miss a workout ever. And I eat really tight from a diet perspective. So I have the energy to do what I do. And then I keep doing it. And I just have firm boundaries, but I keep on adding and I keep then on finding people that have the flame that's needed to execute on the stuff that I add. And I'd encourage everybody to find their version of that and to execute with reckless abandon and take maniac action as a result.
This guy is a maniac. I love it, Jared. Hey, thanks for being on today. How can people get a hold of you? Obviously, there's people with some great ideas and great work ethic and have, you know, some big visions listening to the show. How could they get a hold of you to either refer some opportunities to you or potentially bring their own opportunities to you?
So I'd encourage everybody to go to the website. So project10k.com, 10 like the number 10k.com. We have many different access points. So go check out all the different access points and get involved with whatever's most appropriate. That is also where, if you have an idea or you know someone with an idea, have them submit it there and go through our process. I know this audience is a group of investors. We are actually doing a formal fundraise right now. This is the first time we've ever done this because Grant's scenario was just by accident. There was nothing formal about that whatsoever. We're raising $20 million as we speak. We're well on our way. Not only do we have interest, we have commitments and capital that's already been contributed. So it's really well on its way. And it's the only time we'll ever raise capital like this is right now. And it's ownership of the actual holding company, which I would imagine what would be more exciting than that. And that's not me saying it because I started it. I'm saying it because it's so diversified. It's so on the pulse of entrepreneurship. It's so impactful. So if there is interest there, we speak into that a bit on the website, but feel free to, on any social platform, send me a message. I'm happy to send you more details as well. You obviously have to be an accredited investor to invest in that opportunity, but it's definitely a unique, unconventional opportunity. And anything that was once unconventional becomes conventional, because there was a point in time where going into a stranger's car for a ride was like extremely unconventional, or sleeping on someone's couch that you didn't even know was like, no, I would never do that. Or documenting your life and posting it on the World Wide Web, like, no way, no how. And every one of those things is now normal. So this is an unconventional opportunity that we are proving is conventional and becomes a new standard in entrepreneurship. So love what you're doing, man. You're an excellent interviewer. Like I mentioned, I do at least 2, sometimes even 3 of these a day. You listen extremely well, so I want to honor that. Your questions are on point, and you know your audience, so you're asking questions that can really serve your community. So great job with everything you're doing.
Thank you, Jared. Thanks again for being on the show. Hey guys, make sure that you're on the next episode because I keep bringing on crazy visionary entrepreneurs just like Jared. See you on the next one. Thanks for listening. I hope you got out of this as much as I did. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review so we can reach more people. Jump over to mariodattilo.net and find out what else I got going on. Be sure to connect with me on all the socials, and I'll see you on next week's show.